welcome. This is the Bernama Mobile Studio coming to you from the Energy Transition Conference 2026 or ETCon26, brought to you by Tenaga Nasional Berhad, TNB. It begins from the 2 days ago, which is the 3rd of June, until the 5th of June 2026, here at the Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre, KLCC, Malaysia. So for those interested, please attend to ETCon26. You have a few more hours to go, a full day to be precise. And for those who are in the know or wanted to know what is ETCon, it is basically a conference and a platform that aims to responsibly advance the region's clean energy transition, convening key stakeholders and the globe, across the globe, and showcasing pathways towards a shared low-carbon future. So for those interested here, you can meet with industry players, policymakers and experts, where you can ask questions regarding energy transition and green technology and get your questions answered here precisely. So today we have a special guest coming to you from London. He is none other than Peter Godfrey, FEI, the Asia Pacific Managing Director of Energy Institute. So welcome to ETCon26 and also welcome to our humble mobile studio. So how are you finding the conference so far?
It's been a great conference generally. Again, over the years, I've been watching Malaysia and the whole of Southeast Asia and where it's developing from an energy transition point of view. And clearly there is a great move now towards actually finding ways to look at energy security, look at sustainability, look at resilience within the context of climate change in a very different way. So at last, the region is beginning to realize just how important it is to start pulling together a lot more. And I think that will be the answer of where both Malaysia and the whole of the Southeast Asia region will need to go as time goes on.
Will this be part of your session, which will you be speaking on later?
So the session that I'm about to speak on is actually looking at skills. And of course, mentioned by both ministers actually in their keynote addresses, both yesterday and day before yesterday, was the subject of how important community is, how important a just energy transition is. And that just doesn't involve people in the energy business, it involves us all.
Everyone.
So the subject that I'm really talking about is what is an energy professional of the future? Is it what we knew from the old days when I went through university, when I went through school? Or is it actually changing? And I believe it's fundamentally changing. And what we need to do is to think about training people in a much broader range of skills going forwards.
So Peter, working in energy used to mean picking one specific lane like electrical engineering or geology and mastering it for life. But today's world, you've pointed out that being deeply specialized in just one single discipline isn't going to just cut it. So you have to be a master in various fields, especially to ensure that the next generation of professionals can bring forth the agenda that we are trying to put to advance forward. So what is driving this shift from people who mastering one single area to multiple ones at once?
So I think there are a number of different issues, and it comes back to the fundamentals of what energy really is all about. In the past, and going back now to the old oil and gas era of 110 years ago or 20 years ago or however long it was before it came about, is we developed a system that was developed by the oil companies in that day, which provided a very linear supply chain between supply and demand on a global basis. Now, clearly, given where technology is taking us, and where issues like resilience and climate change is taking us, is a much broader range of the ways that we can produce energy, deliver energy, supply energy to our consumers. And that requires a very different sort of mindset, because what we're doing is recreating the value chains of the past, developing a new set of systems, which actually requires a different set of skills. So in addition to engineering, you mentioned mechanical engineering, or we could be talking about civil engineering, or electrical engineering, technology is taking us down a route where we've really got to think very much more seriously about issues like resilience going forwards, or the word sustainability. What we do today isn't just for tomorrow and a few years, it's for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Exactly.
So we need to think about that. We need to think about how that will be competitive in the world going forward. So we don't want to create something that is going to lower the economic competitiveness of Malaysia or wherever else we are working. And we also need to recognize that increasingly energy is not just energy for energy's sake. It is part of our basic economic system. And that people that are professionals in our industry need to understand how energy is now playing that role. It's not just about filling a tank of petrol and getting on with your business anymore. It's a much, much more complex ecosystem, or many ecosystems that need to develop that actually run that energy going forwards.
So when we talk about energy shift towards the greener energy, a phrase we hear a lot is systems thinking.
Yep.
So it sounds great on a slide deck, but to people on the ground really want to know what it really meant and how it translates to the real world. So what exactly does systems thinking mean, and in the context of new energy economy, and why is it vital for delivering real transition outcomes?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really, as I was just saying now, systems thinking is not just about understanding energy. It's about the fact that energy does not operate in isolation. So basically, systems thinking is to recognize that actually it's increasingly part of industry transformation. You know, if we look at data centers, data centers, for example, are very energy hungry. They are part of the system.
Water, yeah.
Exactly. They use a lot of water, not just energy. So how do all of these things actually combine in the most optimal way going forwards? So again, back to this issue of saying you can't look at energy just in isolation. You've got to look at the broader picture and develop a broader picture that will allow Malaysia's industries to expand and grow effectively and competitively. And that's about the joined up writing. So systems thinking is very much not just about the energy value chain per se. You mentioned water. You know, I could mention lots of other things like manufacturing or transport or agriculture even, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Each one of them have different ecosystems that need to be considered, you know, because the days of yesteryear are being replaced by a lot of technological advances. In agriculture, we're seeing more use of drones. We're using more use of mechanical tools instead of people, right? So all of this plays into the whole story. And those interconnections are really what systems thinking is all about. Is that one needs to think slightly out of the box in terms of how these things develop going forwards.
In terms of the Malaysian side, do you think that Malaysia is currently heading towards the correct direction when it comes to transitioning into new energy, like you stated earlier?
So my view, and very much from discussions that we've had over the last couple of days with TNB and others, is that the answer is yes. I think Malaysia is increasingly, and to a certain extent, driven not only by technical issues, also by what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz and everything else, is beginning to think, wow, we've really got to think about security and how we're going to compete in this new world in a very different way. And I think what's one hearing, certainly at the high level, is a recognition that, yes, we have to move in a different direction. We have to bring the population along with us. We have to make them part of the story and give them value from being part of that story. So I think that conversation is now very much on the right track. The issue now is really how we deliver on that. So one of the areas that I think is really interesting around this is, you know, again, over the years, Southeast Asia has talked a lot about integrating the region.
Like the Asian power grid.
And the whole ASEAN piece, right?
Yes.
So not just the APG, but also the whole story about how we integrate. I think Malaysia is now very truly driving and very much a leader in promoting the idea that actually security is not just about us. It's also about how we interact with our neighbors. And that piece of regionality is becoming more important. So the old distrusts of the past are being replaced by a very different conversation going forwards. And again, that's part of that systemic thinking, right? People are beginning to think we don't operate as a nation in an island.
Yeah, you cannot work in a silo anymore.
Exactly. So this whole issue of integration is beginning to really become part of that jigsaw.
But then again, advancing a national agenda like the NETR 2050 is very different when it comes to cross-border cooperation, like you said. So How do we navigate these challenges? I mean, we have some. Not every country has the political will. I mean, they have their own agenda, and they have their own limitations when it comes to infrastructure readiness, policies, and also the integration of their network to the ASEAN network as a whole. If, like you said before, so how do we navigate these complex challenges to ensure we reach that objective?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I guess I wrote an article a few months ago about this. To me, the first thing, and you talked about silos, when it comes to engineering, but one could also say, and I say this in a comic sort of way, but
Yeah.
we could also say that most of our governments operate in silos.
Yeah.
They have a ministry of this and a ministry
Yep,
of this and a
yep.
ministry of that, right? Now, the issue here around energy security, as we've just said, is not actually about energy security, it's about national security. And what we need to do is to start getting better at joined up writing. So we're back to systems thinking, right? Is the fact that, it's not just an energy problem. It's national security at the end of the day. It's how we're going to survive and grow and prosper as a nation. And that's at the heart of what we're trying to do here, nothing else, right? So if one begins to start focusing in on that and all of the interfaces that can be developed between the Ministry of the Economy, the Ministry of Energy, the Minister of Defense even,
Okay.
and we begin to start thinking about these in a more joined up way, we're likely to come up with the solutions that we need. So to a certain extent, it's about joined up writing. It's about doing the knitting in a different way to the way we did it in the past.
What about in terms of mentality? I mean, you said that to achieve this transition smoothly, every ecosystem and basically the entire structure needs to adapt from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
But then again, if you have the political will, you have a very structured policy and also good support from the green funding, for example. But the people on the ground is not ready to accept change and are probably a bit hard to adapt with the new changes. Like you said, there are people who are very they still wants to be in that old spot where they used to be, like, so they are thinking, why should we reinvent the wheel when the wheel is still spinning? So what can you say about that? I mean, how can we change this?
I think it's already changing. So I think technology, AI. So let's get on to the subject of AI, which is obviously a key
The
part
in
of
thing
this
right now, yes.
part of this conference. The mere fact that we are now all, as human beings, able to see so much information and use ChatGPT or whatever one uses to actually develop our thoughts even more, is opening a whole doorway that needs to be, to a certain extent, managed, and managed by different ways of thinking and leadership. That's still very much work in progress. We don't have all the answers to that.
We are getting there.
But we have to get there. I mean, we can't live in a world, we're not living in a jungle where anything can happen, right? At the end of the day, we have to move forwards in a similar direction. And leadership is all about trying to create that direction. So the answer to this is complex, right? There's no simple answer to your question. But at the end of the day, nations, regions, and to a certain extent, the whole world, but I think regions and nations in particular have to begin to start thinking about these issues more seriously. And I don't think there's any coincidence that we're beginning to see nationalism playing a greater part in global geopolitics than it has done for a time. Everybody talked about this world village. Why? Because as we go back to the old oil and gas days, world economies, we lived in a global village. Everything was understood. This was the way the system worked. Well, we're doing everything we can to break down that system now around the world. So we've got to start reinventing it. So the answers aren't there, but what we need to do in terms of leadership is now right at the top of, I believe, the leaders of Malaysia and the UK and wherever else you are in the world's minds today, because they recognize clearly there is a need to kind of re-architecture
And we have
about
to,
what leadership is all about,
Yeah.
and education.
and yes, and education.
And skills.
But then again, throughout the history, what we have observed that humans are very adaptable. I mean, we are acceptance to change, no matter who we are, where we are, who we are. I mean, we got here because we adapt to changes, right? So, okay, as energy professionals today, they can't just focus on the machines or the engineering. Suddenly, they have to understand green funding, green financing, managing carbon footprints, and how a project impacts the local community, all while ensuring that the operations run smoothly. So, how can professionals successfully integrate highly diverse fields such as sustainable finance, carbon management, social impact into traditional engineering or operational field?
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, the answer to that question is all about what the Energy Institute refers to as continuous professional development. Can you learn everything at school? No. Can you learn everything at university? No. How quickly is technology moving? Very quickly. So the issue here, and this is very much the heart and soul of an institute like the Energy Institute, is how do we create a journey for individuals in terms of continuous professional development, and a journey that isn't just occupied by businesses, because obviously businesses and the bigger businesses do their own training,
Yes.
but create a learning system that is a lot more dynamic than we have had in the past, okay? And people that recognize that's part of life, right? It's not a part of you grow up, you go to school, you go to university, you get a job for 50 years, 60 years, and that's it, right? It's about a continuous journey of learning and a continuous professional development path. So what that looks like, again, is work in progress, but it's something to me that is at the heart of what a professional institute should be all about. So why is the Energy Institute of the UK here? It's because we recognize that to do this is not just about doing it in the UK, it's about everybody working together.
Yep.
So how do we cooperate with institutes in Malaysia, in other parts of the world, in order to come up with a program that is sensible and meaningful and drives the human being, and particularly in our case, the energy professional, in the right direction to have a prosperous career and at the same time to continue their development throughout their working journey, basically.
So you said that you work with multiple electrical utility companies and also people in the energy industry across the globe, right? So they are always working together. But how do you see this synchronization going on in terms of transitioning towards new energy? Are they really working in cooperatively, or still there are still some gaps that needs to be addressed?
So, well, I think, part of that question is not just about the person, but it's also about where the money's going. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So one of the big problems here is that, obviously when we get into how businesses still operate with a focus on their core business. So as we've seen, the oil and gas industry, for example, hasn't got a great track record of really helping us when it comes to renewables or energy transition. A few years ago, they were spending a lot more money in that area. They're pulling back because now obviously the oil and gas price is going up. So you can understand that shareholders are driving the business in different directions. Right? So part of this is also recognizing that this has to not only be driven by human beings and values, but it also needs to be driven by how economic incentives are driven as well. And the answer to those solutions are not that easy either, because, how do you change the regulations in a country like Malaysia to effectively encourage the more rapid development of other technologies that are not oil and gas into renewables, for example? It's not easy to do, given the way the economic drivers are currently placed. So there are answers to that, and to me, again, this is personal speak, not EI, it's about, back to this ecosystem concept, it's about the fact that there isn't one size fits all solution, but there are places where you can turn a refining and petrochemical site into a clean energy site as well. So encourage an ecosystem to develop that encourages data centers or whatever other businesses into that area, and begin to start looking at it as a smart new area, and do it on a geographical basis as opposed to try to change all the regulations in one go. So the answer to your question is, I don't think we can change the whole world tomorrow, and I don't think regulations can change fast enough to do that. But what we can begin to do is to start creating some of these ecosystems, and then people will begin to start saying, oh, these are actually much more effective than the way we did things in the past.
So we started small in multiple
And
areas,
then you begin to start seeing
yes, and
pattern
once
going,
so it
right?
what it will work in tandem one day. So basically, it's
Correct.
one big ecosystem, like you
Correct.
said.
Correct.
All right.
So I think increasingly you've got to see governments prepared to step out and try those experiments. Try something different. Try to make an ecosystem that we haven't had in the past work. Provide the incentives, provide the bonuses for that to happen, and then hopefully over time, it will give you the sort of KPIs, the performance indicators that says to government and says to industry, wow, this is something we ought to invest in going forwards.
But then again, some of the issues that the panelists previously have raised is market confidence when it comes to investing their money into green energy transition.
Yeah.
So how do we ensure that these investors are hooked and not just investing based on what people are basically the current trend is? I mean, the market currently is very dynamic, very volatile, it's unpredictable, and as we know, investors love predictability. So how do we address this as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think the answer to that is quite complex, but quite interesting in that obviously you're beginning to start seeing Europe, for example, putting in regulations that are trying to create that predictability on a large scale within a European system. So there are, governments that are really beginning to start putting things in place. It has its pros, it has its cons. Some of it, people don't like, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism that is being put in place by Europe. But basically they can do it under those terms. Interestingly enough, again, a personal view here, and we're sitting, in a conference that is run by TNB, I think Southeast Asia actually has an advantage in this area. Why? Because basically the energy business and to a certain extent the power business, including TNB, are state-run and state-organized. They're not
Monopolies.
free market.
Yep.
So in reality, I think because of that structure, there ought to be a simpler way to do this in this part of the world than there is in a totally free market economy like Europe or America. So interestingly enough, I do think the push and the shove ought to be more possible in this part of the world
Okay.
than in other parts of the world. Not only that, because we are still growing in this part of the world, in Asia, and because clearly there is a lot of prosperity and industrial wealth still to generate, our infrastructure is actually short. In Europe, for example, it's quite mature. You can only change it on the edges. Here, we still need to build power. We still need to build new pipelines. We still need to build new things. So again, we have the opportunity to push this in this region in a way that perhaps other regions can't.
And also learn from what the mistakes that probably the EU did before.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely.
Does this apply to first world country like Singapore as well? I mean, Singapore is very small. It's it's an island, but then again, their electrical and also their green energy infrastructure is quite mature. I mean, compared to other neighboring countries.
Yeah. So I think two things, and actually I live in Singapore, not in London.
Okay.
So although it's a London institute, I
So you
live
can
there.
say a lot about this.
So yeah, Singapore is very much an energy consumer and has developed itself very much as a sort of trading hub and a financial hub. So I think increasingly Singapore recognizes this regionality and recognizes it has a role to play within the context of its own core skills, which are very much around trading, financing and helping. So I think they are increasingly, and you see it with discussions happening with Sarawak, discussions with Malaysia, particularly in Johor with a special economic zone, being developed in a way which will allow that sort of role of Singapore to effectively provide finance to actually do what it does best and work very more closely with host countries like Malaysia to come up with joint projects. And I think the ASEAN Power Grid is also supporting that, right? So as that develops, you're going to see more and more, as was discussed at the conference, bilateral, multilateral deals being done within the region that will be actually a very important piece to do. So where I think Singapore has its strength, it clearly hasn't got much energy resource of itself. It's going to always import energy, is playing a role in facilitating that process through financing, through the regulatory side and through, obviously helping to develop the correct standards and processes and procedures.
All right. One thing that I really want to ask is that as technology changes, the human needs to adapt, like we discussed before, right? And this includes training, upskilling, and reskilling of current personnel when it comes to clean energy and green energy. Since these new technologies can't just be downloaded and uploaded to a new person, they have to train and learn about a lot of this. So, the old training or the old playbook is not valid anymore. So, how must professional development bodies and talent institutions pivot their old training towards a new kind of training to ensure that these new personnel are ready to accept this transition?
Yeah, well, I think, training, as I say, if it's lifelong, it's not just about classroom training. It's about mentoring. It's about, having a process in place that goes beyond the classroom. And that's, I think, where institutes come into play, because, again, part of our job is not just the training side and, the chartered professional side of things, but also the whole issue of bringing people together socially, right? And interacting with each other in order that, people learn new skills, not necessarily directly through doing the job, but by speaking to the right people. Because, as I say, complexity requires us to actually socially interact a lot more. And one could argue that actually AI and working on a computer is taking us down a different direction, which is we can do everything behind our keyboards. So there is that tension that we need to develop as well. And again, there are no simple answers other than to say if institutes are doing their job well, doesn't matter whether it's an energy institute or a naval institute or even a surgical or a medical institute, right? It's about getting the right people together in a room and having the right discussions that will drive things in the right direction. And that's what we need to concentrate on as well, that social interaction.
So if there's one clear takeaway that you've just shared with us, a major takeaway is that energy transition isn't just about changing our infrastructure and also policy, but also the readiness and also the mentality of the people from the top to the bottom, supported by the infrastructure and policies and also the banking institutions. I mean, all of the things that we've discussed before. So it's about fundamentally changing how we trained as well and think and train as professionals. So it is a very interesting discussion, and I believe 30 minutes is not enough to cover every aspect of what IE is currently doing right now. EI, Energy Institution. All right, so a huge thanks to you, Peter, for spending your time in our humble motorhome. And I hope that we can talk about this at length in the future. So for those for you at home who are tuning to Bernama, this is the Bernama Mobile Studio coming to you from the Energy Transition Conference 2026 or ETCon26, brought to you by our electrical utility company, Tenaga Nasional Berhad, TNB. For those who are interested to attend, please do so from the 3rd of June until the 5th of June. This is the final day, so please come and see for yourselves how the energy transition is currently going, especially in Malaysia and the regional countries and also the entire global stage as a whole. I am Muzammil Abdullah, and thank you. Goodbye.